Hi, I'm NASA astronaut Danny Olivas. I'd like to welcome you to my very first virtual event, Diversity, Embracing Our Past to Launch into the Future. I thought today we'd do something a little bit different than our traditional astronaut presentations and talk about things that are topical and very important to me, near and dear to my heart. Um, I haven't had an opportunity to fly on the space shuttle to the International Space Station twice and do a total of 5 spacewalks. Astronauts have a very unique perspective from space. As we look down on the Earth below, one of the things that we notice is that the only real borders that we see are those between the land and the sea. A lot of the other borders that we tend to think about from a human perspective are not visible from space. In fact, they exist really kind of as constructs of human minds. I thought it was also appropriate to talk about diversity in this particular presentation uh, because I was a product of the space shuttle program. Now, a lot of people don't know this because a lot of us that are here today have forgotten our past, but the space shuttle program and the space shuttle era ushered in what we know as today diversity within the Space Corps and within space exploration. The space shuttle program saw the very first female astronaut, the first African-American astronaut, the first Hispanic astronaut. And so that by opening up the aperture of what human beings can do by working collaboratively, the space shuttle program actually brought in to the program the best capability that the United States had. Now, in addition to doing that, the space shuttle program through NASA collaborated with our international partners. In fact, the International Space Station, which is the first colony in space that was put into orbit in 1998, is still there today. And it's actually a collaboration of 16 countries across our globe. And if you think about diversity, we're talking about not only different countries where we speak different languages, but different cultures and different backgrounds and different ways of doing business. In fact, even the units of measure that we use are different. We here in the United States like to use inches and feet. In other places, they use the metric system, using meters and kilometers. So today's virtual event is in support of something that's near and dear to me, El Paso Matters. El Paso Matters is a nonpartisan media organization who uses journalism to expand civic capacity in the region of my hometown in El Paso, Texas. We have a lot of great things to discuss today. I'm glad you're here joining with us, but at this time, I'd like to hand over to the organizer of the nonprofit El Paso Matters, Bob Moore. Bob, welcome.
Thank you so much, Danny. It's great to be with you today. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation about the importance of diversity. As Danny mentioned, he's from El Paso. I was not privileged to grow up here like Danny was, but I've lived here for many, many years. And being here on the U.S.-Mexico border, where we're in a multicultural, binational, bicultural region, really shapes who we are. And I think Danny can talk a little bit more about that, as can a guest we have today who's joining us, Kara Santana, who, like Danny, grew up here in El Paso and has gone on to great success. And one of the things that everybody needs to know about El Paso is we really celebrate the people from our community who go on to the great success. And Danny and Kara are certainly emblematic of that. I'll talk a little bit about Kara. Kara Santana is an El Paso native, born and raised here on the border. She's an actress, a fashion designer, and entrepreneur. And so I'm sure some of you are already thinking, so what does a fashion designer and an astronaut have in common? Well, stand by. I think you'll be surprised. Kara launched a direct-to-consumer clothing line independently earlier this year, and it's called the Kara Santana Collection. The motto of this collection is "For Everybody," and she embodies just that, not only in her clothing line, but in her approach to life. So check out this video of Kara's collection, and then we'll have Kara come on and talk a little bit more about herself.
Cara Santana collection stands for growth, independence, and sustainability. I decided to take back the reins and release this line independently, and it feels so good to stand on my own 2 feet. I've teamed up with Step Up to donate a portion of the profits to an organization that stands for strengthening inner confidence in young women to pursue their career goals. Women are the future. It's the reason that I wanted to design this collection with all women in mind. Whether it was a pop of color that could be a style standout or something that could fit into your everyday wardrobe, I think there's something for everyone in this collection. The Cara Santana collection is for everybody.
Hi, it's so great to be here. I'm Cara Santana. Sure, many of you are still wondering, what do an astronaut and a fashion designer have in common? Because I'm not sure that that video articulated it. But I'll just start by saying El Paso, Texas has been the greatest influence of my entire life. It has shaped me, it has grounded me, and the fundamental aspect of that is inclusion and diversity. That is something that has grounded me so deeply and something that I listen to and follow in everything I do, whether it's the roles that I take, the clothes I design, whatever it is. I'm thinking about inclusion and diversity and what makes El Paso so great. When Bob asked me to be a part of this, I said yes, because anytime Bob asks me to do anything, I say yes. He is just quite the special man, and I really appreciate and value everything that you do for El Paso. I love El Paso Matters. I love what it stands for. And Astronaut Olivas, it is so amazing to be here. We had a chance to connect yesterday, and many people probably don't know. But as we found out, El Paso is not the only thing we have in common. My grandfather was the chief deputy administrator of the Johnson Space Center, and he was very influential in the space program and helped you walk on the moon. So it is so great to be here celebrating El Paso, celebrating diversity, and celebrating the space program. So thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us, Cara. Really appreciate you being here. And yeah, I certainly appreciate the contributions of your grandfather. So, and I too am a big fan of Bob. Bob's a wonderful man. They've started doing a phenomenal job with El Paso Matters. And so I look forward to having a nice discussion today.
Me too.
Well, thank you both for the kind words, but enough about me. Let's talk about you guys. We're here to talk about the importance of issues like diversity and inclusion and how it shapes the way the two of you approach the world. But let's start. You're both from El Paso, so let's start talking a little bit about some of the personal and social barriers that each of you had to overcome in your chosen profession. Starting with your origins in El Paso, and then as you made your way into the rest of the world. So talk about your let's start with you, Danny. Talk about your journey through some of those issues.
Sure, I appreciate that, Bob. I think growing up in El Paso, one of the things that I came to appreciate, really not so much while I was there, but actually when I left, was how inclusive the El Paso environment is. Growing up on the border, I never really fully appreciated some of the physical differences that separate me and my friends. It was kind of growing up, if you would, in a bubble, and where I was really exposed to the fact that there are differences in society was when I took my first job, which is in the Central Texas area, where I started to appreciate that there are some real challenges out there with regard to inclusion of diverse thought. When we think about what inclusion of diverse thought means, it's not just about the color of someone's skin or maybe a religion that they practice, but really trying to open up our understanding of each other so that we can have an open dialogue with one another, and we can hear people who have different experiences and ourselves be heard by them, and take in what we have to offer. because one of the things I was very fortunate in that having had an opportunity to be part of the space shuttle program, you get an opportunity to see this firsthand. Um, as I was a kid growing up in El Paso, I had a lot of influence by my parents who exposed me to things like science and a lot of activities, playing football, just a number of things that I think parents try to do for their students or for their children to expose them to kind of the breadth of all that's really out there in life. But it was through taking these experiences and ultimately kind of discovering that I had a knack and a desire for engineering and science that led me on the path that I was led down. Now, I will say that growing up in El Paso, you do grow up in this kind of microcosm of being largely a large Hispanic population. And I think as I looked into society, because I had an aspiration to become an astronaut when I was really young, about 7 years old. But it was in that outward view in the world. Remember, I was a child of the Apollo era. I didn't necessarily see a lot of people out there that I could look at and relate to as having my similar types of experiences. And so there was a bit of a challenge to see myself as being someone who could be accomplished like an astronaut. And that took a lot of encouragement from my parents. Ultimately, my girlfriend, who became my wife, basically to encourage me to really push myself hard. And it was through that pushing myself beyond what I knew, beyond my comfort level, that really allowed me to go beyond that which I was comfortable with, and really kind of experience that there really was a great world out there for me to go off and explore and to partake in. And it also opened my eyes to a lot of other things as well. So, I mean, I kind of think that's a big part of how El Paso shaped my beginning and got me set up to go down the path that I ultimately pursued.
Carol, people in El Paso often say that they're in something of a bubble here, and I think Danny just touched on that. But I'm curious from your experience, and I have the advantage of knowing both your parents too, and they're both very accomplished and very important members of our community. But so, did you find yourself in a kind of a safe bubble in El Paso that as you kind of went out in the rest of the world, you kind of realized, oh, things aren't always the way they are in El Paso?
Yes. And the short answer to that is yes. I think one of the greatest privileges that growing up and being raised in El Paso afforded me was the open mind, the innate sense of diversity being a fundamental part of society and embracing that diversity. And you're sheltered in a way in El Paso because it's the norm. It's acceptable. We share this amazing city with our sister city. We're, two sister cities thriving in utilizing each other economically, socially, and in every regard. So when I left El Paso at 16 years old for California to pursue my career in entertainment, I just assumed as a young girl that everyone would approach it this way, that we wouldn't see the color of our skin, our socioeconomics, or what gender. We wouldn't see that. But obviously, and what we're seeing even right now is that that's very much not the case. And so much a part of the decisions that I make when I choose a project, or whether it's in entertainment or to develop a fashion line or launch a marketing campaign or endorse a product, the first thing I always ask myself is, what is this saying to the general public? And how am I bringing to the forefront this idea that diversity and inclusion is something to be celebrated? How do we focus on each other's principles, and not our personalities? How do we see our similarities and not our differences? Something my grandfather always said, which is something that my mom always repeats to me. And I actually think my mom may be joining. So if you are here, Mom, hi, Mommy. And my Aunt Joan, I think she's here too. But was that the world is full of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And that is so true when I think of El Paso and when I think about what my grandfather did at the Johnson Space Center, what astronaut Olivas has done, what you have done, Bob. You know, we're just ordinary people, but with a little perseverance and drive, you know, we're able to accomplish extraordinary things. And that is something that I have seen and I know to be true from growing up in El Paso, Texas.
That's a good segue into the next question, because so you grow up in this environment, you go out in the world, and everybody at some point, especially people of color, will start to run into obstacles, right? There are barriers that get thrown up. So I'm curious. I'll start with you this time, Kara. You know, what did you do to get past those barriers or through those barriers when they started to pop up? And if there's, you know, a certain story that really sticks in your mind, that'd be great to relay that too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that anything needs to be sugar coated. I don't think that we're through those barriers, you know. I think those barriers exist still to this day, you know, and hopefully conversation like this and programs like this help to sort of break down those walls and those barriers, you know. As a woman with the last name Santana, you know, as a woman with the last name Santana that looks the way that I look, people make certain assumptions about capability, about talent, education, experience. And then when you just look at it aesthetically as it relates to show business, you know, fitting into sort of a stereotype, whether it's, you know, the Latin BFF or the popular white girl or whatever it may be in layman's terms, it's everyone wants to put you in a box, you know. Oh, I ran an on-demand beauty app for 3 years, and I was the sitting CEO, and it was my responsibility to procure investment. And I would go to Silicon Valley and I would sit with these mostly men, 50-year-old men who were giving out investment, and they would say, you run a beauty app, you're an actress, you're a woman, you're like not even 30. So there's ageism, there's racism, there is misogyny, there's all of these things exist. And I don't know that I have one story. I think it's just a culmination of a lot of different events, you know, and you can choose to be the type of person that sort of succumbs to people's, you know, stereotypes or opinions of ability or accomplishment, or you can just say, you know what, I'm not going to. With the Kara Santana collection, for instance, the first collection was a collaboration with a big retailer by the name of Kohl's, and it did really, really well. And after COVID hit, they were unable to support the collection, but my manufacturer had already spent over $500,000 producing the line. And so it was like, either, you know, we just kind of tank the clothes and say, hey, that was a fun experience, and, you know, say on to the next. Or I could double down on something that I'm passionate about, something that I believe, you know, has impact as it relates to young women and being a young female entrepreneur. And, you know, I decided to put sort of, you know, my money where my mouth was, and decided to launch the collection independently. And who cares that I'm a woman? And who cares that I, you know, don't work in the fashion industry really? And who cares that I don't have this big major corporation and that I'm independent? Who cares that I'm under 35? You know what I mean? I'm just going to do it, and hopefully people will resonate with it, and they have. So I think it's just really about continuing to strive forward and thinking about, you know, the younger generation. And then I think about my mom, who's, you know, a female attorney in an all male dominated society, or my grandfather, who was the first person in his family to go to college, and everything that they've accomplished and persevered through. And I'm just going to keep doing it.
So Danny, before you joined NASA, you were a path breaker already. You graduated with a doctorate in engineering from Rice at a time when there weren't a lot of Latino PhD engineers. So you've been blazing paths for all of your adult life. So how do you work through those obstacles when they pop up?
Well, you know, this is a really interesting question, Bob, and I'm going to actually give you two real quick stories. One is, and a lot of people, you know, maybe not can fully appreciate that, but even as I think at the time I was maybe the seventh Hispanic to fly in space. And I think at the time I was the first spacewalker who was of Mexican American descent. to actually, go out there and do spacewalks. Even that step into that role and having that kind of exposure with those kind of responsibilities, there were still people that were that I interfaced with who looked at my position that I held as being one which was checking a box. So I've always known through my entire life that the accomplishment bar in order to prove myself was always going to be high. And I tried not to let that be something that would deter me from reaching as high as I possibly could. So that's one story. But I think one that's actually been more important, and it's been one that I've actually had to grow into over a number of years, is to be self-reflective and to see and really appreciate where I've missed those opportunities to truly be inclusive about the way I view the world around me. So as an example, when I was getting my undergraduate in El Paso, in the engineering college, the majority of the people who were in my degree program were all male. And in that environment, the professors, I believe every one of the professors at the time they were male, and 95% or so, or maybe even greater, of my colleagues were male. And as I got into my first jobs out of school, I was surrounded by, mostly male engineers. And I think for me, there was an awakening that occurred within me to truly appreciate and value the contributions of the other gender, because not only did I see them in the technical sense, but certainly over time, my appreciation for the value that women have to offer our society across a number of different spectrums, whether you're talking about social or technical or economic, is there. And I'm very happy to see that as time has gone on, we're seeing a greater representation of women in our workforce, not just within the technical confines of something that is maybe like the astronaut program, which, by the way, is still not, in my opinion, adequately represented. But we're starting to see them in higher positions of leadership within companies, within the government. Certainly, this is a historic election we see coming up in front of us. We have have had highly qualified candidates that are across the spectrum, and I think as we continue to move forward as a country, the things that we can learn from our past is how much more valuable we have been as a society by being more inclusive of the diversity that is the melting pot of America. And just like what we've seen in space, where 16 countries across our planet put together probably the most complex engineering phenomenon that humans have ever embarked on in the International Space Station. Since the year 2000, we've had permanent human existence 250 miles above the surface of the planet, traveling at 17,500 miles an hour for that entire time. And it'll continue on to the future. That doesn't happen by chance. It doesn't happen because you have this parochial thinking of only I have the right idea, only our group of people have the right idea. So, I certainly, I think this is appropriate to say that, one, those barriers are going to exist, and we have to set our own personal goals as high as we possibly can and push ourselves, but then also be self-reflective to see what is it that we can do as individuals to grow and ourselves be more accepting of diverse thought.
By the way, I think in the year 2020, there are a lot of us that would sign up to be 250 miles above the face of the Earth right now. So I'm very envious of the people at the International Space Station sometimes. We've talked a little bit about your own journeys, but I know for both of you, influencing the generations coming up behind us are really important for you. So my next question really gets to that. And Danny, I'll start with you. What do you tell people who are coming from circumstances like you did, a grandchild of immigrants in your case, growing up Latino. Obviously the world's much different today than when you were growing up, but those challenges are still there. So what kind of advice do you offer to this generation that's coming up now?
Well, I do take my leads from there's a prayer called the Serenity Prayer, and in a nutshell, it basically says, look, there's a lot of things outside of our control that there's nothing we're going to be able to do that's going to affect. And I think your question's actually spot on with today's situation. We have a global pandemic which has hindered everyone's ability to conduct life as normal, at least as normal as it was, a year ago. And there's not much we as individuals can do about it. But more to your question about what I think really helps is that as individuals, if we recognize that we work hard and we never give up, regardless of what those barriers are, we will find a way. Now, it may not be the path that we think is going to get us there, that we thought about today. Tomorrow, that path may change. But provided we work hard and we don't give up, we can accomplish anything we want to in this life, so long as it's not violating the laws of physics or the physical world around us. Then we can accomplish anything. And so to all the young people out there, I encourage you to keep that in mind. You work hard, never give up, and you can accomplish anything in your heart that you desire, any goal, any dream, any aspiration. But it does take the effort, and it does take a recognition that there's a huge responsibility placed on your shoulders to just go and do that.
And Kara, you have, for those who don't know, a huge following on Instagram, and a lot of those are younger people, and they look at you, and and you take that. I know you take that platform quite seriously. So how do you? This frankly feels odd for me. You're very young, so I feel strange saying, what advice do you have for the younger generation? But there are people younger than you. So what kind of guidance do you give them?
I probably look younger than I actually am. I made a decision pretty early on. I was late to Instagram initially because I thought, as an actor, as someone in entertainment, I really wanted to have a sense of anonymity and autonomy from, my personal life. And I wanted to be able, for people to see me as a character and not tie into them who I actually am. But I had, the distinct realization that so much, of the landscape of our society is shrouded in mysticism. You don't really know what people are doing or thinking, which is why, Bob, what you do is so important, because you just like cut straight to the truth, and you're so passionate about doing that, and you really cut through the BS, so to speak. And I thought, I have the opportunity to articulate and put out the messaging or the information or the opinion to people who are interested in what I have to say, to put it out there and to be transparent and to be honest and to be authentic and to engage people. And so that's the decision that I made to do, to take it or leave it. I mean, not everyone always likes what I have to say. But and brands don't always like what I have to say. And I've lost jobs over things that I've said. But for me, that sort of sense of integrity and that conscious decision to be truthful and to make it known how I feel is really most important to me. And so that's the decision, that I made.
And I wanted to follow up on that with both of you too, because obviously we live in a very polarized society right now, and you both have a lot invested in your personal brands. You're not out there to make people angry at you if you can avoid it. But both of you have shown courage to take a stand when you think it's important, and actually there's some overlap there too. I think one of the connections I have with both of you is what happened in Tornillo, which is a little town right next to El Paso, where the government set up this huge migrant child detention facility around the time of family separation. And I know that upset both of you. And Danny, it also upset your wife, who's also from El Paso. So how hard is it to, in this day and age, to take a stand that may cause you some problems? Is that a hard decision? Carol, let's start with you.
Sure. I think we were all there, right? At the rallies, all three of us, and Danny, your wife as well. We all didn't know each other, but we were all there. I love, that was something that brought out such a great sense of community, and brought out like-minded people all there for a common purpose, which is, again, one of the things I love about El Paso. I know both of my parents are on because my mom texted me that it took my dad 30 minutes to figure out how to Zoom. And then she told me she could see me texting, but I was texting her. So she's like, but I can see you texting. They'll both tell you. And if there's a global comment section, you'll probably see it. I've always been the kind of person that marched to the beat of my own drum. I've always been outspoken. I've never really held back. I told the headmaster at St. Clement's that the marquee said goodwill on earth to all mankind. And I was greatly offended in fourth grade because it didn't say all humankind. And I blame them for that. Both of my parents are incredibly integrous and ethical people. They value community. They value diversity. They value inclusion, and they always taught me to stand up for what was right, no matter the cost. And when I think about, my grandfather, which is sort of, for me, aside from El Paso, the key that kind of ties us all together, he was someone, my grandmother was someone who always felt a tremendous amount of responsibility to use their voice and to speak up for those who couldn't speak for themselves. And I take that, incredibly seriously. There was I was out in Los Angeles for all the protests after the George Floyd murder and the Breonna Taylor murder. And there was a sign that said, if you ever wanted to know what you would be doing during the civil rights movement, during the Holocaust, you're doing it right now. And I thought, my family, my mother's side of the family are of Jewish descent. And, I thought to myself, like, yeah, I want to be the type of person that's doing something. So if that means I fly from my cozy little house in Los Angeles to Tornillo, so that I can hold a sign and make my voice known and put it on social media so people know that this is an issue that if they aren't aware of, are aware of it. And if they're afraid to be vocal about it, know that there's a community of people that are vocal about it. And if there's someone who follows me that feels like no one cares and they see that I'm there, maybe they'll know that people do care and they can persevere. So I think, it's in my DNA. It's how I was raised. And a large credit of that is the community of El Paso, Texas. So it is what it is. And I don't really care if you don't like it. And if you don't want to shop my clothes or see my movie or watch my television show, then don't watch it.
Danny, you and Marie, put your money behind your action too. You created a foundation around some of these issues. So does it concern you at all that, taking stands on issues that are important to you may, cause you grief somewhere down the road?
Well, I want to say that in my lifetime, I feel like we both collectively, myself and my wife, Marie, have taken the stands that we needed to at the right time. And especially with regard to what was going on at the border in 2017, we, having been products of El Paso, Marie and I both really felt that certainly what was being represented in the media and what the rest of America was seeing was not truly what we knew, what we understood growing up in the border culture that we had, where we had friends on both sides of the border and could freely cross, and we knew that what was being painted out there was not truly representative of what we knew. And we wanted to get involved. And as you mentioned, Bob, that we formed the Space for Everyone Foundation, which is our own personal foundation, which allows us to be able to support those organizations, which really focus on the rights of children, and specifically, the fair and equitable treatment of them before the law. I will tell you a story, though, that I think is certainly appropriate at this time. Is in my very first space mission, STS-117, after I completed my very first spacewalk. This is my first opportunity to go out there and actually see the world from that vantage point. I remember at the end of the spacewalk, we had completed everything early and was on my way back to the airlock. And this was at nighttime. And I thought to myself, I've been so busy working and concerned about messing something up that I hadn't really taken time to stop and just see where I'm at and experience it. So I was on the truss segment on the way to the airlock, and I just stopped briefly and I looked down at the world below, and it was a nighttime pass, and without knowing where I was through any kind of world map or any kind of GPS, anything like that, I knew exactly where I was because I could see dotted the shoreline of the subcontinent of India. So I was over the Indian Ocean. I could see all the way out to Myanmar, and it was at night, beautiful lights. And then I stopped, and I said, okay, I've now seen the Earth below, and so I just rotated myself and looked briefly out. And it was at that point that I realized, I fully appreciated how alone we really are, because as I turned away from the Earth, I could see the infinite universe. And we are the only human beings that we're aware of in this entire universe. Now, we can get into debate as to whether or not there's life out there somewhere. That's not what we're talking about here. Within our solar system, third rock from the sun is the only thing that has bipeds on it. We're bipeds. We walk around with 2 feet or 2 legs, right? And yet, as I look down at the Earth below, it was a little disheartening and frustrating to know that the pain that so many humans like myself feel are inflicted upon by one another. And yet, when you compare that to what we were able to accomplish when we worked together, like the International Space Station or the Space Shuttle program, by bringing in as opposed to excluding and pushing out, we can accomplish these tremendous, phenomenal accomplishments as human beings. But it was in that reflection of, wow, we are really here all by ourselves. And as much as we might think that the Earth is big, in the universal perspective, it's a speck of dust, and it's our speck of dust. And we're all brothers and sisters as we live here on this planet. And by being more conscious about how we interface and we treat one another, we have the ability to accomplish so many phenomenal things. So many of our problems can be resolved if we think less about what makes us different and more about what makes us the same. Where's our common goal? We all love our children. We all love our family. We all aspire for the future. We all want clean water to drink and plenty of food to eat. These are commonalities. So by focusing on that, and if we can get to the point where humanity can see that, then I think we'll start moving in the right direction. The one thing I wish I could have done while I was in space was take the space experience that I had and put it into a little bottle and cap it and bring it home. Because the first thing I would do is I would share it with every person here on Earth who's never had that opportunity to see space from that perspective, because it's in that experience that you truly appreciate how alone we are. And I think gives you a better appreciation for how much we truly do need to rely on one another to protect each other and to protect the planet that we live on.
I have one last question for me, and then we're going to turn to the audience. But both of you take this role of diversity quite seriously as each of you go to market too. And Carrie, you've talked a little bit about that in your choices of roles and things like that. But it also plays out in the clothing line you have right now. So do you want to talk a little bit about how these issues of diversity and inclusion play out as you go into the marketplace?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I was very fortunate enough to be on a television show this last two years, a show called Vita, which is about the gentrifying East Los Angeles community and LGBTQ rights, which was something I was, very passionate about. As an actress, you get different opportunities. And I've tried to be very discerning about the types of roles that I take and make sure that there's a message and make sure that I'm making an impact and telling a story that needs to be told. So, that was something that was very, very, specific and intentional for me. And then as it related to the Cara Santana collection and prior to that, the Kohl's collection, which was, basically an extension of the Cara Santana collection, but now I do it independently. I really wanted to make sure that young women not only saw themselves in our marketing campaign and could identify and feel like they were being seen, but I wanted to make sure that the clothing was a reflection of that. Astronaut Olivas talked about checking the box. And I wanted to make sure that we weren't checking the box. I wanted to make sure that we weren't performing. There's a lot of talk about performative allyship and what that looks like. And I wanted to make sure that this was intrinsic to our brand because it's inherent to who I am. Growing up in El Paso, how could it not be? So, when the opportunity to design the collection first came to me, I said, I don't really have a desire to be a designer. But if I'm going to make this make sense for me, I want, to have total control over the marketing campaign and make sure that I can design in a spectrum of sizes, not just 0 to 12, but 0 to 24 and, triple XL. And I just wanted to make sure that all women saw themselves, in my clothes. Otherwise, I felt like I was just sort of contributing to the status quo. And I feel like, the status quo needs to be changed. So there's always a conscious decision. I look around at my team and the majority of them are women. The majority of them all come from diverse backgrounds. And that's something that's important as well. I want to talk the talk and walk the walk and make sure that whether I'm endorsing a product or signing on for a role or launching, a clothing line or product line or starting a company like the Glam app, that I'm thinking about all people, all women. And so that's something that is critical to me. And as I move forward, I will continue to do that.
Danny, we've talked about various roles you played in life, engineer, astronaut. There's one we haven't talked about, and that's a children's book author. And I want to give you an opportunity to talk about how the importance of diversity played out in that for you. So talk a little bit about the book that you've authored.
Sure, I appreciate that. And several years ago, I wrote a children's book, really to kind of commemorate the space shuttle program, told specifically from the perspective of an astronaut, because I wanted to make sure that the information was right. A lot of people, for example, and this will be a topic for discussion later on, but people think that the reason that astronauts float around in space is because there's no gravity in space, and that's actually correct. But I think in writing the book, part of it was one that Marie and we have 5 children. And so we understand the importance and the value of the future generation and reaching out to them and making sure that we are engaged with that generation so that they understand that, we are providing opportunities for them and having a dialogue with them. But in addition to that, in writing the book, I approached the publishers and said, hey, look, I want to make sure that this book is available in Spanish as well. And I will say, because of the market, the fact this is going to be marketed here in the United States, there was not a lot of excitement, a lot of interest to go and pursue a book that was written in Spanish. And so through connections I had within El Paso, families and friends contributing, We ultimately converted did a translation of the book into Spanish and approached the publisher. And once they saw how serious we were about producing the book in Spanish, they basically said, okay, we're here to support you. And they were very gracious, and they did the right thing, and they helped us actually produce the book in Spanish. Now, as I said before, there's things that you don't have any control over. So for example, COVID was something that hit everybody hard. And part of what we wanted to do was make sure that I wanted to make sure that community was aware that my wife and I, were going to continue to do whatever it is that we could to try to help make things a little bit better. So earlier this year, we released the audio book of Endeavor's Long Journey and made that available through YouTube. And now we're sitting here basically near the end of Hispanic Heritage Month 2020, at the end of a long pandemic. I'm proud to say that I now have the audio book in Spanish, which is available for everyone's use. You can go to the YouTube website, you can download it, and it's free for you. And it's not much that we can offer, but Marie and I, we want to do what we can to make sure that the community that we feel like we represent, the community that we serve, understands that to the extent that we can make sure that we have not forgotten, and we're going to continue doing whatever we can do, regardless of what the world around us is telling us what we can't do. We're going to try to do that. So I do appreciate you mentioning that, Bob.
So I'm going to go to questions from the audience. I'm going to start with what I think is a great question. This comes from Ella. Kara, if you could go into space, would you? And Danny, if you could be an actor, would you? Kara,
yeah, I'd like to leave November 2nd, and then depending on what happens, I'll let you know if I want to come back or not.
So Danny, how about an acting career for you?
No. I tell you what, I would much rather get strapped to 7 million, tons or 7 million pounds of explosive and get blasted off the planet than try to even read from a script. Oh my gosh, I have 2 children that are into the theater arts. They graduated from UCLA. They're wow. into theater and art, and I've seen what they do, and I don't want any part of that. That's way harder than solving any physics problem.
That's funny.
Next, we're going to go to a question from Abby, and this is for both of you. And Danny, let's start with you. Is there one thing you could do different in the paths you've both chosen? And if so, what would it be?
Boy, I think if there's one thing I could go back and tell young Danny what old Danny knows now, I think that would be to have more confidence in myself. I mean, I may come off as being a confident person because I've got a PhD and I've got pads, I've done this, I've done that. But my younger self, I questioned a lot of what my capability was. And I think this is actually relevant to a lot of young people that are out there. They question their value, they question what they're able to accomplish because they're comparing themselves to the world around them, where they see people who maybe have already accomplished. They're comparing themselves to the Jobs or the Gates or the Musks of the world. But that doesn't need to be the comparison. The comparison needs to be, what did I do yesterday and what am I doing today? And going back to what I said earlier about working hard and never giving up, if you're thinking about, how am I going to accomplish some level of greatness, it's only going to be measured by what I did yesterday. So if I can do something better today, that's what I need to do. If I push myself a little hard yesterday, I can maybe try today to push myself a little bit harder. It doesn't mean it's going to happen consistently every single day, but that same philosophy, that same process, if I'd have really applied myself in school and done really well in schools, maybe I could have done something with my life. I don't know.
So, Kara, anything you would have done differently on your path?
That was such a thoughtful answer and so beautiful. So the first thing that came to mind for me was, coulda, woulda, shoulda, wouldn't serve me now. Every single thing that I've done, every wrong turn, every misstep, every self-doubt, fear, insecurity, poor decision that I've made has led me right here. So, I'm in the mindset of sort of the idea that everything happens as it should. And I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it.
That's a great answer.
Two different perspectives,
Right. We're drawing near the end of our hour together, and so I wanted to give each of you a chance to sort of leave us with some closing thoughts. Kara, maybe you could start by telling everyone where they can find you, and then maybe leave us with some words of inspiration. It's been great talking with both of you. I think I'm going to fade out now and just listen to Kara talk a little bit, and then Danny will have the final closing remarks from you.
Well, I want to first start by saying thank you, Bob, for asking me to be a part of this. As I mentioned, you asked me to do something, and I will probably never say no. So I think what you're doing for El Paso is fantastic, and I'm so thrilled to be a part of it. And Danny, it was a pleasure getting to know you over the last couple of days and chatting with you and hearing your story. And, it's amazing that so much has come out of, so many wonderful people have come out of our community of El Paso, Texas. It's really telling. If you want to follow me and hear some unsolicited opinions on politics and social issues, you can find me on Instagram at Kara Santana and Kara A. Santana on Twitter. If you're interested in shopping the Kara Santana collection, you can find it at thekarasantanacollection.com. And just to note that 5% of all profits go to support the Step Up Network, which is a nonprofit organization that gives under-resourced communities for young women mentorship and helps them become career focused and college bound. So if you want to buy something that's fashionable and support a great cause, do that. And you can stream my latest movie, Be the Light, on iTunes. And if you want to catch up on Vita season 2 and 3, you can download that on the Stars Network. Thank you, El Paso, for being such a guiding light in my life. Thank you, for really informing me and all the decisions that I've made. And if you're listening to this and you've been inspired today, all I can tell you to do is keep going, keep moving forward. There is so much potential out there. And thank you so much for listening today.
Kara, thank you very much for your parting words. I really do appreciate you joining us here today on this virtual event. I'd like to thank everybody online who's joined us as well. This is a slightly different venue for myself and many of the astronauts who are participating in this virtual event series. So we certainly do appreciate everyone out there participating in this way. I want to thank Bob Moore with El Paso Matters, encouraged for those who want to continue to support independent journalism, taking on some very, very difficult, challenging, really pushing the envelope to discover the facts and the truth. El Paso Matters has done a phenomenal job tracking a number of the social issues that affect the border community, as well as investigating things within our own government. So I encourage you to look online and do some research on El Paso Matters. And Kara, obviously Kara Santana, a wonderful person, and she's doing a number of great things across a number of different platforms. I hope many of you are as equally inspired by her as I am. She's certainly a wonderful person. And I also want to, again, thank everyone for joining. And I want to leave everyone with just one more really quick story, if you'll just appease me for just a second. I think probably one of the most phenomenal things that I had an opportunity to experience while I was on up in orbit was at the end of my very first space mission. So we had just finished working on the International Space Station. I had done 2 spacewalks. It had been a really phenomenal space mission. We had our sets of problems, encountered issues, and worked our way through them with the support of tremendous people down on the ground. And because we were going to we're trying to land the space shuttle at the Kennedy Space Center. We had to make sure that there was good weather there before we did our deorbit. And unfortunately, because we were trying to come back on a very specific day, that day the weather was really bad. And so they gave us a wave off. So we got an opportunity to actually spend a full half a day in space without a whole lot to do other than just relax. In fact, that's what Mission Control told us to do. And they said, we're going to try it again the following day. So we decided, myself and my crewmate, Jim Riley, JR is his call sign. JR and I decided, because I'm growing up in West Texas, I'm not an astronomer, but I am a stargazer. I love looking at the constellations, looking up at the sky at night, and just being in awe of all that I see. So we decided to go up on the flight deck of the space shuttle. Now, you have to remember, when you're on the space shuttle, you actually get an opportunity to experience sunrise and sunset every 45 minutes because you're going that fast. A total of 16 sunrises and sunsets throughout a 24-hour period. Well, this was a nighttime pass. And so it was dark up there. And my JR and I were on the flight deck of the space shuttle while everyone was in the mid deck down below. And we closed all the access hatches to cover all the light to make sure no light was escaping into our purview. Turned off all the computers as low as the lights would take it. And then we just looked out the windows just to see what was there. And I recall looking out the rear of the window of the space shuttle and seeing what I thought were two clouds in space. And I thought to myself, that doesn't make any sense. How could you possibly have clouds in space? There's no atmosphere in space. There's the vacuum of space. So why are there clouds in space? So I reached down there's a little locker on the space shuttle that had really powerful binoculars. Now, for those of us who live in the Northern Hemisphere, we've never seen this. And if you've been fortunate enough to be in the Southern Hemisphere and happen to look up at night, you might have seen this. But years ago, an explorer by the name of Magellan made an observation and recorded this, that in the Southern Hemisphere, there's a celestial phenomena that essentially are two small clouds. Those are referred to as the Magellanic Clouds. The Magellanic Clouds are not clouds at all, but in fact, what they are our neighboring galaxies. And so as I peered through these binoculars out the rear of the space shuttle at these galaxies, it made me think and appreciate, wow, here I am on this third rock from the sun, on this little bitty teeny tiny vehicle orbiting this planet 17,500 miles an hour, looking off light years away at our next door neighbors and looking deep into these galaxies and seeing more stars than I could see overhead just by looking through the binocular scopes. And it made me realize that, one, we're pretty small. And the things that we've accomplished, as great as we might think that they are, in the celestial universal comparison, they're pretty small. But then it also gave me hope, because it was also about how much there is left to be explored, how much there is truth left to be discovered and to know. And so as I leave you here today, I encourage you to don't consider where we live today as being all that we can be, because we can be so much more. We can do so much more. By the application of two very basic principles: work hard and never give up. By working hard and never giving up, we can accomplish anything. There's nothing that we as human beings cannot do, provided they don't violate the laws of physics or the physical world around us. I want to thank you again for joining us here for our virtual event, and you all stay safe now. Goodbye.